End of the year already. A very special warm welcome to everyone tonight. We do have a full house, and it is a very, very important. My name is Reem Burrows. I'm the founder of Dream Coaching and Consulting, as well as a AABC board member, and I've been with the AABC for just over 7.5 years. Thank you. Okay, that's great. Good start. I would like to start by acknowledging that this event is being held on the people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I also acknowledge the Indigenous people of Palestine and their right for self-determination. The land of Palestine has always been shared by a diverse group of people living in harmony. Like the First Nations people and the history of this country, I acknowledge the devastation and mass atrocities continuing in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Sudan, Yemen, Iran, and overnight, the atrocious behaviour during a supposed negotiation. I hope that through greater awareness and collective action, we can work towards a world free from genocide, violence and injustice. Palestine was and always will be Palestinian land. Thank you very much for taking time out during this acknowledgement. The Arab Business Council next year will celebrate 20 years. 20 years. And I know I repeat this every time, but you know that repetition is the mother of all learnings. And we need to acknowledge the reason why the AABC was founded in the first place was to bring our community, our entire community together at a time where we were alone. But now more than ever, we are feeling the pressure and needing to be around, surrounded by like-minded people. And we have in Australia, as immigrants to Australia, we bat way above our average. And we should be proud of that, and we should be encouraging people to come and join us here every single month. And we should be working together very supportingly and networking. It's a beautiful place to be. AABC is not a place where transactions happen. It's not just transactional. This is where there's real warmth and connection and long-term sustainability. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here after 20 years. So we work very, very closely with governments and businesses to build local and international trade relations. We do that within Australia and have established a very strong working relationship and networking between members. Now, tonight we stand at the crossroads of opportunity, regulation and financial inclusion, ready to explore how Islamic finance is not only shaping the future of Australia's economy, but also redefining what ethical, purpose-driven finance looks like. And we're going to go in a lot more detail in a few minutes. I would like to acknowledge all our platinum members, Sam Annette Harb of Sam the Paving Man, our foundation partner, Mr. Joe Risk and Able Bank, Gold members, Mr. Sam Talib and Tempe Tyres and Mr. Peter Khayat from KPR Recruitment. Our silver members, IMB Bank, Naturally Timber, PFS Accountants, RM Gregory Promotions, Hamden and Associates, All Start Solutions. Tonight, we need to enjoy each other's company. Please enjoy the food. Enjoy the delicious mezza. We will have breaks in between. But my favourite part of the evening is to introduce this gentleman. Now, he doesn't need introductions, but I don't know if anyone's been watching his social medias lately. I am sure after last week's performance, this man's going to get some kind of hair sponsorship, hair product sponsorship around the place. But without further ado, the man who puts this all together, the reason why we're all here as well tonight, George Busamra.
Thank you so much, Reem. Big round of applause from Reem Burrows, everybody. Fantastic job as always. Just as a note as to a bit of a pretext about why we're doing this event now on Islamic finance, and it's a topic that I've been following for roughly about 10 years, and that's since I first took out a mortgage. I always thought there's got to be a better way of doing this and research into the topic as much as I could. And then, when it came time to look into this a bit more further, just by coincidence, and there's so many people in the room that I met through serving ice cream, and we'll hear about that a bit later. And then we just kind of built this network of people who are operating in this space. And I think now is a great time to talk about it because it is a growing market, and it's something that will probably hit about $6 trillion in the next 2-3 years. So it's important that we understand it and we embrace it as much as possible now. In terms of the growth of the organisation, it's great to see a lot of young people now taking on the... Thank you so much, Sam. Big round of applause for Sam. From Ozchem. And so it's great to see so many young people, new businesses coming on board with the Australian Arab Business Council and really bolstering that side of the network and really looking at that sense of community that we cherish and value. And it's great to see that being taken up in the next generation of businesses. So really am grateful for that. Thank you for all the likes and the love hearts on the Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApps. I try to give this event a bit of a plug, and I think in my last post I had a bit of a hair malfunction on it, and I think I made it worse throughout the clip. But I think I'm this close to getting a really nice hair sponsorship, with hair gel sponsorship of some sort. So watch this space. We might get a new sponsor for this group. Anyways, all right, I'll leave you to Reem and the team, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, George. This is a bit too low for me now, George. Just let me... So please do watch this space, because we've decided after George's little social media events last week, we've decided this is going to be a regular thing, and you will see it on the AABC social medias. And if there are any sponsors out there, George, he's got the flick happening. Now, tonight, we do have the privilege of hearing directly from three of the most influential voices in Australian Islamic finance. Together they bring the academic rigour, the entrepreneurial spirit and the institutional reach that is shaping this sector into the future. We are going to have the format as a panel tonight. So what I'd like to do is read each person's bio, and as I read the bio, please do come up and join us, take a seat, and then we can start the interviews. And I will also have the opportunity for members to ask questions at the very end of the panel interview. Our first guest is Dr. Inessa Buckley, Research Fellow, University of Melbourne. Inessa brings 2 decades of community work and academic expertise, bridging the gap between Islamic law, gender and practical finance. She's also the author of Not Completely Divorced, Muslim Women in Australia Navigating Through Muslim Family Laws. And here's a quick fact for you. While most of us are trying to just get through our emails and manage our daily emails, Inessa manages to balance publishing, teaching, advocacy and finance all in one go. So please welcome Dr. Inessa Buckley to the stage. The next guest I'd like to welcome to the stage is Dr. Imran Loom. Dr. Imran is Head of Islamic Finance, National Australia Bank, NAB. Imran pioneered NAB's award-winning Islamic business banking and is the author of A Comparative Study of Islamic Finance in Australia and the UK. He also hosts 2 successful podcasts, Muslim Money and Arabic with Imran Loom. And here's what cracks me up. So I'm Palestinian, born in Palestine, came out here when I was 14. I speak AABC. That's what I call it. Whereas Dr. Imran himself is fluent in Arabic, and we're going to be testing him out here tonight. Please come and join us, Dr. Imran. Thank you. And I love your kafiyu. Thank you. Third guest, please, if you can join us, is Asad Ansari, who's co-founder of Amana Islamic Finance. Asad is a seasoned lawyer and financial services leader with more than 25 years' experience across Australia, Southeast Asia and the Middle East. He has co-founded one of Australia's most innovative Islamic finance providers, expanding access to home ownership through Sharia-compliant solutions. He was also behind the financing of one of Melbourne's tallest buildings, number 568 Collins Street. So when he talks about big projects, he really means big. So please welcome, and on the stage, please. Please take a seat. Welcome to all three of you. I don't know if you realise just how much talk this has generated for us. So the topic in itself has been, I'm just going to turn around like this. I don't normally do this, but I need to because of a little bit of theatrics for you. This particular topic has generated so much conversation within our community ever since we posted about it. So first of all, thank you for being here. But maybe we can start with a couple of questions as to why. And maybe I can start with Imran, if that's okay. أهلا وسهلا فيك.
أهلا وسهلا. السلام عليكم. كيف حالكم؟ إن شاء الله كلكم طيبين.
يعني بجنن ها؟
ليش أول مرة شفت الصيني بيحكي عربي ولا لا؟
I love it. So I'm going to come to your school of Arabic, okay? بتعلم الفلسطينية كيف تحكي عربي. شو رأيك؟ Hello. So, Imran, can you please explain what Islamic finance is all about?
So بالعربي
اللي بدك إياه بس إذا بدك عربيزي up to you.
So Islamic finance, what it was all about. So just if you can take yourself back to, I guess, all the religious traditions. If you think of the Abrahamic faiths, the Jewish tradition, the Christian tradition, the Islamic tradition, also the Hindu scriptures, they all have some sort of prohibition on interest. So if you can think of, some of you might be from a Christian tradition, you might remember, Sunday school and Jesus kicking out the money lenders from the temple. And so the Christian tradition actually had a similar prohibition on interest up to the time of Luther. And after that, they changed their interpretation of that prohibition to usury. So in the Islamic tradition, we kind of retain that prohibition. And it stems from 7th century Arabia, where, the only time you'd get a loan is if you're really struggling. So say, for example, if Assad was really struggling, I'd give him a loan. And if he couldn't pay back, there was no bankruptcy laws. So I could increase the interest rate, ضعافاً مضاعفة in the Quran. It says doubling and redoubling. So he effectively becomes an economic slave. But so we're taught to kind of give a loan to God, so to speak, which is an interest-free loan. And if they can't pay back, then we're taught to forgive it, just to let it go. But while there's prohibition on that, there's no prohibition on trade. So I can buy something, I can sell it, we can do a JV, we can have a fee for service or an asset. And so Islamic finance is generally all about that kind of participatory in nature.
That's very interesting. Thank you so much for that. So it's a very ethical style of approach.
It's if you think of a back to basics type of banking, and then it has an ethical overlay, which maybe Asad can talk about a bit later, but we have certain screenings for certain industries, so we can't invest or engage in industries like alcohol, gaming, arms, etc. So we have...
Okay, thank you. Well, maybe that's a good time to actually move to yourself, Asad. How does Islamic finance lead to a more equitable economic system?
Thank you. Thanks for the question, and thank you very much for inviting me here. So I think when you talk about Islamic finance, you have to separate two concepts. There's the concept of Islamic finance as a philosophy and its ethical underlying nature. And there's Islamic finance in practice as it exists in a very capitalistic world, right? So you have to separate the two. And as we talk about it, I'll talk about the second as to how Islamic finance exists nowadays. But if we talk about the paradigm, the sort of ethical underlying behind Islamic finance. So in a traditional sense, a bank or a financier is there to provide finance, and the financier de-risks itself. That's sort of a traditional mode, and that's how finance has evolved and developed, and that's the critique around it. Islamic finance in its purest sense is supposed to be where the financier takes risk, right? So the financier and the customer jointly take risk in a venture. So what that means is that when both take risks, the decision-making of the financier changes dramatically to one where it's simply not taking risk. And I think that sort of that underlying philosophy creates entrepreneurship, it empowers communities, it's economically impactful. And so I think we're talking about ethics, and there's obviously ethics around how contracts are drafted, how a customer deals with a financier and fairness and so on, and that exists in a lot of traditions. But I think if I was to pick one thing to make it simpler, it's about creating a joint risk relationship, and that dictates how these two entities, one being institution, one being an ordinary individual, deal with each other. That's it in its sort of philosophical form. How it exists in practice, I can talk about later on.
Okay. No, thank you very much. Now, Anissa, you wrote a recent article about the historical role of women in the Islamic finance system, and that was. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure.
Or a lot?
No, that's okay. Thank you so much for the opportunity here tonight. Yes, I think, I mean, for the Muslim community and generally here in Australia, but also across the world, Islamic finance is becoming quite a booming industry. But since my work as a finance broker, I've found that there's been a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of financial literacy among women. And just increasing their confidence in being able to know what to do, how to look for, and how to get into the market. But it's not something that's new. In Islamic history, being Muslim, that it's something that a lot of Muslim women are not perhaps aware of. There's lots of examples of women in the tradition who have taken quite, very forthright, very sort of, pioneering roles in the finance industry. A lot of us may be aware of, the time of the Prophet, his wife Khadija. She was managing, her business at the time, but also at the time of the Caliph Omar. He appointed a woman to manage the market there. So, and then moving into sort of the Abbasid and the Ottoman empires, there were situations where women who had a lot of wealth, whether that's through inheritance or their mahar, the dowry that they received at marriage, or just through their income, they thought and they created these concepts of charitable endowments, which is waqf, or in plural awqaf, and they were not just for their families, but they were structures and concepts whereby they would, purchase an asset, and the income from that asset would be used in perpetuity. So it was a long-term asset. And some of the examples of this are there's a waqf ahli that they could do for their families to be able to specifically help support their daughters. But then there are other examples of what's called waqf khayri, which is the charitable endowments. And you have, in particular, some of the wives of the sultans. So one of the wives of Sultan Harun Abu Rashid, she set up when she went on her first trip to Hajj, she saw that there was a lack of water, and she built a well. She funded a well that is still in existence today. And then also Sultan Suleiman, one of his wives, she set up lots of soup kitchens and kind of what is known now as probably little mini hotels along the way, you know, on various travel pathways to be able to help support and care for travellers. And the first university, which is still considered the oldest university in the world, in Fez in Morocco, Al-Qarawiyyin, that was set up by Fatima Al-Fihri, and that was set up through a waqf. And these are examples that a lot of women today can look to in terms of, you know, thinking about using their wealth to not just support their families but also for community benefit. So there's lots of you know, wonderful examples there that Muslim women and other women can look at in terms of structures and ways to build their wealth.
Thank you. And it's great to be able to be reminded of all these examples throughout history, because I think a lot of times it does get lost in translation here, being in a Western country. And because of the media and how, dare I say, demeaning it can be, it paints a completely different picture. So that leads us back to yourself, Imran. Is like, how difficult was it to establish this Islamic finance offering at NAB?
Very difficult, incredibly difficult. I think the first thing is بصراحة ما في أي مساعدة من الحكومة، هذا أول شيء بالنسبة للتمويل الإسلامي في هذا البلد. There's no support from the government. So if you think of in the UK, Hong Kong, Singapore, Luxembourg, they've all amended tax laws to facilitate Islamic financing. Whereas in Australia, we've got no support. There's no government kind of support in that regard. So we thought initially, you know what, we're just going to have a crack and kind of prove that there's a market. So we initially started with Islamic bonds called Sukuk bonds, and this was going to be the first kind of $1 billion issuance into the Islamic capital markets. We kind of converted all of the underlying leases to what we call Ijara Muntabid Tamlik, commercial hire purchase, Sharia compliant commercial hire purchase agreements. Got all the structure. The difficult thing is tax, got around all of that thanks to Assad back in his day when he was at Deloitte. And ready to issue, and the government shut it down. So I thought, khalas, you know, I tried. But then, alhamdulillah, we managed to pivot the business. We had a lot of foreign investors that are coming in, Islamic investors that wanted to invest in Australia, particularly in property, but they wanted to get financing onshore. And so we managed to do a few deals to show that there's a market. And then it took me 5 years to convince the NAB to actually launch their own product. So 2 years internally trying to convince about 70 different risk teams that all think we're funding a group of guys in the mountains. And another year and a half fighting the ATO, another year, COVID, etc., all new products get pushed to the end. But then, alhamdulillah, probably about 3 years ago, we launched our first product, which is for construction financing, another year for acquisition financing, another year for a corporate financing facility. And alhamdulillah, we've financed probably over $1 billion across Australia, and it's continued growing.
Just an add-on question to that, if you don't mind. So for those who doubted and had blocks in your way, once you brought those billions of dollars in, what was their response to that? Oh, so there was nothing.
Look, one good thing, I've had some really interesting experiences, like real people blocking, like serious blockers. Some do it because obviously anything related to Islam, it's quite confronting for them. But I've had people really in the bank, non-Muslims, that, you know, see the barriers that I've had and really throw themselves, like jump in front of the bus because they can see an opportunity. And one thing that is interesting about Islamic financing is that trade and business, it has to be a win-win situation, right? And there's an adjustment on that side, there's an adjustment on your side, and when there's a benefit and trade, and philosophically Islamic finance is about trade, it's hard to say no to that. So I think that's how I got around a lot of the blockers.
That's fantastic, and we should.
Blockers.
That's fantastic, and we should acknowledge also that in our culture, in our communities, we tend to work 10 times as hard as anyone, and resilience is something that now comes naturally to us. So thank you. Asad, what was your motivation to work in this space, and how challenging is it to establish home finance products at Amana?
So the first part of the question you asked me about my motivation, I spent most of my career in the corporate world. So I was analysis with a large law firm. And so at a personal level, I was fed up putting around paper and dealing with corporates. And I realised that it's much better to be in a space that's impactful. And genuinely speaking now, I've got customers of mine who are included in finance. So we're talking about financial inclusion, who are able to buy a house in the suburb they want, in the school they want, and prior to that they're renting. They've been the beneficiary of house prices increasing over time. So for me, that's impactful. And I mean, Islamic finance is about that impact. And I didn't get that in the corporate world. So that's the first thing, at a personal level. In terms of the challenges I've faced, I think that one of the assumptions around Islamic finance is, and I saw this in the corporate world, I saw that with governments. I worked a lot with government. I was on a board appointed by the government looking at amending tax laws in Australia to facilitate Islamic finance. It didn't go anywhere. It was around the time we produced a report by this government body, and it was around the time that Pauline Hanson wanted to inquire into halal meat certification, etc. So it was just bad timing. Scott Morrison was around then, and anyway, I won't get into the politics of it, but nothing happened. But there's an assumption in government and in corporate that there's this big tap of oil money in the Middle East, and you open it and suddenly flows in Australia. Genuinely, that's what people think about Islamic finance. And I'm sure a lot of senior people that now probably thought the same thing, even Imran can't say that. And the biggest challenge you find is that that doesn't exist, right? Finance is about relationships that exist well over time. Right? And I still remember when I was at Kuwait Finance House, the Islamic Bank, I had a call from, and this was 2008, so this was the global financial crisis. I had a call from the head of Treasury from a large Australian bank, who called up and cold called me out of the blue. I don't know how he got my number. He said, look, I'm the head of Treasury, and at that stage all the funding got stopped in all the major banks in Australia. Anyone in that industry knows how bad that time was. All the markets and capital flows stopped until the government came in. And he said, oh look, we want to see whether the Kuwaitis would put money into our banks here. Anyway, the governments came and bailed everybody out, and then radio silence from the Aussie banks. The point here being is that this isn't a tap you turn on and off, it's about long-term relationships, right? So for us, Islamic finance wasn't about going overseas and getting money, it was about having partnerships with Australian non-bank financiers who we can work with and who we can work in the current system with. And I think that was the biggest challenge, getting them over the line. And we took about 4 or 5 years to do that because we wanted products in our community that are as good as products that people would get by going to them now. And that's what we try to do and try to innovate and improve. And I would say that one of the challenges we have is that it's never good enough in our sense because we want to keep on having something that's better, that gets closer to that risk sharing element. So in a nutshell, that's probably our biggest challenges in doing it.
Thank you so much. And I'll come back to, I've got a question on that, but I'll come back to that. I do want to hear from you, Anissa. What motivated you to get into this space?
Well, look, I mentioned about the financial literacy of women, and my PhD was on Muslim women in divorce, and I saw a lot of challenges that women faced. A lot of the times there's, in many Muslim families, there's an expectation that the husband will be the main provider, and that, women can have their own income and they can, do things with their own income if they want, but I saw the impact of things like divorce on women and their families, and they were left in situations where they then had to become, in many situations, the main financial provider. In one situation I had a woman who, she was you and her husband had a lot of money and income through cash that on the books, she earned more than him and she had to pay him child support. And I saw story after story of women who, were facing situations where they had to step up and they had to think about themselves, they had to think about their families, and there was a big gap there in terms of how these women would be able to support their families and move on with their life. So I transitioned from being an academic to wanting to do something, instead of just researching and talking to women, I wanted to, again, similar to us, I wanted to help them and help them make that impact. And I wanted to go into an industry that would give these women opportunities. Some of the clients that I've had, it's wonderful hearing their stories. One of them was a single mum, and she said, look, I just wanted to talk to you because, I've been told that as a single mum with a child, I would never be able to get any finance, and maybe that is the case perhaps in Sydney, where perhaps, things, cost of living and everything, it is, you do need to have two incomes, but I said, look, let's just run the numbers, let's just see how you go. It's great that you're reaching out to me. And she could find out what she could get. And she realised, actually what I might be able to get something, even if it's not to live in, as an investment property, to be able to, use the money that they have they can see that there are opportunities that where people in the past or people around them are saying, look, you're never going to get anything, you're never going to be able to progress, you're just going to have to accept the situation that you're in. I also have a lot of female clients who are young professionals. They're making it big. They're doctors, they're lawyers, and a lot of them are still living at home to be able to get support, to be able to save. And it's a matter of talking to them about, okay, what are your financial options? How can you think about, getting yourself set up for a good, strong financial future? And in Australia, property is a really solid form of wealth growth. So for these women, I wanted to be there to be able to offer them these opportunities, to be able to start talking about this, to be able to get them to have these conversations in their families, to be able to show that women can get out there and are able to make decisions on some of these things. Perhaps some of them feel like, I've always had to leave it to the other members of my family, but a lot of these women are professionals. A lot of these women are able to, look and think and research, and to have an opportunity there where they can feel comfortable speaking to somebody. I felt that was something that I could contribute to.
That's so beautiful. I mean, what I'm hearing from all three of you, the motivation behind it is impact, adding value to the community, and really providing opportunity where they may not have been that opportunity for many people within the community. It's beautiful. Imran and Asad, what is the future growth for Islamic finance?
I think there's definitely a lot of growth in this area. I think just if you look at the demographics, if you look at just globally, the Muslim countries, very young population, highly socially, economically mobile. If you just look at Indonesia as an example, the growth of Indonesia and how that's growing rapidly, as all that population gets into the middle class, they're going to need Islamic avenues, asset managers to manage the wealth, etc. So globally it's growing, but here in Australia, we're about 3.2% of the population. We're much louder than that sometimes. So roughly about 800,000, so probably now...
It's because we're above our average.
Yeah, that's right. Half are under the age of 25, so a very young population. And as you all know, in these areas, how entrepreneurial a lot of these communities are. So I think from that perspective, there's a lot of growth here in Australia. So it's just about, so for us, we're primarily focused on the, I guess the larger end of town. But you can see when we support these businesses, they employ people from their communities, from their family groups, and it helps the area, it helps the community in general.
Thank you. And before I hand it over to members to ask questions, I do have one question for all of you, and whoever wants to answer it, by all means, please do. In Islamic finance, it often talks about serving, integrity, you talk about purpose, and in practice, how do you balance that with the realities of this highly competitive financial market that you're in, and in the sector where it's like dog eat dog?
Thanks, Imran. I probably not about soften up the answer with Arabic. I think, and I think that's the paradox of Islamic finance. And I worked in the Gulf and in Malaysia in Islamic banks. So I'm familiar with that tension, because at the end of the day, you've got this Islamic bank which has got this ethical/religious philosophy, and it's existing in a brutal capitalist world. And I remember it bizarre because I'd be sitting at Kuwait Finance House in Kuwait, and a lot of shuyukh and what have you were there, and then we'd be getting calls from Goldman Sachs who want to structure things for us, and just that challenge was there. But I think Islamic finance has always been able to navigate that. And it navigates that because of these very strong ethical principles. And if you look beyond that, there's a religious aspect to it, but then there's obviously a cultural aspect to it. And in the Middle East, businesses are about relationships, right? That's across different cultures and faiths in the Middle East. And those relationships underpin things. And so when you get these sort of very greedy, these kind of typical Wall Street investment bankers coming in, and for them it's just transactional. And I think that the strength of that character of having faith and having a very long tradition of good faith, of relationship in business, that's always been able to trump that. And I think that's what underlies it, if I answer that question properly.
Thank you for that. Would anyone else like to add to that at all before I hand it over to?
I guess it's just as an organisation, it's about trying to project certain values to your customers. You want to project, honesty, transparency. You want to project due diligence. And it's very important for, I know on behalf of Amana Islamic Finance, that we do focus on that, and that is something that we like to consider ourselves that sets us apart from a lot of the other Islamic finance providers here. And that's something that we focus on, is our customer service and the values of, like I said, building those relationships and being very aware of our duty, not only to all the regulators, but also we feel very strongly about having, really going back to that religious duty of being able to provide Muslims with something that they feel comfortable taking as an option, and something that will help them to move forward in life, them and their families, and that they're no longer having to need to rent and constantly move from place to place. They've got that stability, they've got we really, I guess, focus on the values that we want to demonstrate to our customers. And I think the fact that we've won so many awards as an organisation, as a company, really reflects that.
Yeah, thank you. And at the end of the day, for anyone who's done any strategic planning, and the importance of strategic planning in terms of values, because most organisations have their values splattered all over the walls, but there's a bit of a disconnect between values and what really happens. And for what I'm hearing from you is that the decision making actually comes from the values and really being anchored through whatever it is that you're trying to represent in the values, and living and breathing them and demonstrating them as well. So thank you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to swap microphones with you, because I'll be the runaround person now. Excuse me for a second.
And we'd love to open up the members for question time. We've got a number of questions there, but let me just start with table number 3.
you so much for your time, for a very insightful, engaging discussion so far. And so far we've discussed the philosophical, cultural, theological aspects of Islamic banking, right? And I'm really interested in understanding more about the practical aspects of Islamic banking. We mentioned a few products. I think Iman talked about now offering a few Islamic banking products. But can you elaborate a little bit more about that, and maybe not only within Australia but outside of Australia? Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a good question, and I wanted to touch on this aspect of it because I started out by saying there's a difference between that philosophy and the practice. So you've got to understand Islamic finance sits within the universe of finance conventionally, right? That finance is, and we look at Islamic finance and say it's X trillion, but that X trillion represents a tiny % of the global markets. And those global markets are driven by capital flows. Those capital flows are driven by US dollars, the Fed Reserve pumping out money or quantitative easing as it was before. And that's what dictates it, right? And then within that, what dictates it also is your prudential regulations for banks. So that means balance sheets. Those balance sheets have to have capital reserves in those balance sheets, which means they have to de-risk themselves. So there's a massive tension. A bank is there to de-risk itself. Islamic finance is there for the bank to take risk, right? So Islamic finance has to live in that environment. And now, if you're in the Middle East, in say the UAE, who has a large Islamic banking sector, if the UAE banks want to deal with the US banks, and they have to deal with the US banks, the UAE banks have to de-risk themselves, right? That's the reality of the banking universe we are in, right? So Islamic finance products haven't, in a scalable, large sense, haven't been able to reach its true potential because of those restrictions. There's no point being a sovereign country like Malaysia, and Malaysia can't trade with anybody else because no one will place money in Malaysian banks. That's practically. We need capital flows to move around the world. So the Islamic finance products, the challenge for Islamic bankers and Islamic financiers is to get products that are closer to achieving more risk, right? And they are moving in that direction. There's a frustration, I'd say, and quite rightly so, amongst ordinary people to say, well, it's looking and feeling a lot like conventional, but I'd rather it be better. But what they've got to understand is the infrastructure's got to be there. In the same way in Australia, the infrastructure is developing, and in time it'll change, right? It'll change by a few things. The one is banking regulators being more open to what we call fractional banking, which is what I talked about before. That's where banks basically have to de-risk themselves. And the second thing is what we are seeing of what is de-dollarization. This US dollar that's really having currencies that are pegged to it, and the global capital flows dictated by that. When that changes, there'll be something else that emerges, but it also takes Islamic finance companies and banks also to risk themselves and say, you know what, we're going to change. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. I'm just going to move on to another question, if that's okay.
Thank you, panelists. My name is Sanveer from Invest Wholesome. My question is, so you've touched upon the challenges and needs for the Muslim community to access Islamic financial services and products. Can you elaborate on if you think that Islamic banking and finance products can benefit the broader Australian population? And can you give some examples of where you think you could add value? Obviously, touching upon the competitiveness of financial services, but I'm really curious about your thoughts on implications for the broader community.
At the moment, because the Islamic finance industry is really in its nascent stages, so we, from a NAB perspective, the way that I'm framing it is still largely on inclusion, financial inclusion for communities. I would have to say though, probably about a third of my clients are actually non-Muslim. And they would typically have they might have a Muslim partner, or they might have a Muslim investor that want to get on board, and so I have probably a third are non-Muslim clients. I even had probably a third are non-Muslim clients. I even had one of them was a Jewish guy actually, and he had a Muslim investor. So it was like a Abrahamic transaction right there. But I think in terms of the Islam, going back to what Asad mentioned, the Islamic structures are fundamentally different. So you have equity-based structures, as you know, and we always start with these equity-based structures. They're called musharaka, mudaraba structures. Musharaka structures are essentially partnership structures. The only challenge is when you implement it in Australia. Say, for example, when we looked at what's called a musharaka mutanaqisa, which is a diminishing musharaka structure, every time I do a deal, I have to get board approval. And there's a capital charge onto it. So you literally cannot do these types. And given the amount of regulation. So one is an actual regulatory challenge of doing these structures. The other challenge is actually from a market perspective. So one other company, MCCA, I wrote a book chapter on this. They had a very Sharia compliant structure. It was called musharaka mutanaqisa structure, diminishing musharaka. And what happened is everybody partnered. Say, for example, all of us come together, we've all put in 100. In 16 years, right? If we're all good brothers and sisters, we're all in it together. If we profit, we all profit, right? If we take a loss, we all take a loss. In years, they found that not one person shared the profit. They would all buy out the share of the other partners, and they'll take all the profits. So you can see in the growth of the last 20, 30 years of property in Australia, how much collectively that would have helped the community. But because it doesn't participate in the true spirit of Islamic financing, then the market had to pivot to something that they're used to, which is a more debt-based, sale-based structure, which is the ijara muntabit tamlik, which is the lease to own, or the commodity murabaha, which is a sale-based structure.
Thank you. We're going to take two more questions because this is a very important topic, even though we're running a little bit behind. Hassan?
How it all works, really. We know, people in the street know that Islamic finance means interest-free finance, right? No riba, right? So if I walk tomorrow to the National Australia Bank and I said I need an interest-free $1 million loan, is that what you can provide?
This is a bit of confusion in terms of what people consider to be Islamic financing. So some people think that Islamic financing is a qard hasan, right, which is an interest-free loan, and if you can't pay back, you can just the financier should let it go. But in Islamic law, there's two parts of Islamic law. One is called ibadat, which is your relationship with God, and the other one is mu'amalat, which is your interpersonal relationships. In the ibadat, which is your relationship with God, there's typically no change. Believe in one God, pray 5 times, we fast in the Ramadan, we go to Hajj, we give charity, zakat. There's not much change in that realm, but we deal with each other, how we dress, what we eat, gender interactions. In that realm, there's a legal maxim, which is al-asl fil ashya ibaha, which is everything is permitted except if there's a clear, what they call nas qati' al-thabut, a clear text from the Quran, from the prophetic saying that prohibit that action. What that means is that when you structure something like a joint venture, it's musharaka or mudaraba, or it could be ijara, or it could be murabaha, it could be different, or it could be wakala. So there's about 12 or so different structures that are permitted under Islamic law, and it's a matter of the scholar, like they might look at it and go, Habibi, this looks and smells like interest, but ya sheikh, I'm buying something, $100, I'm selling it to you for 110. Murabaha, where's the riba and where's the faida in that transaction? I'm buying something, I'm selling it. But economically, you come out to a same it's as if that guy gives a loan for $100 at 10%. So Islamic financing typically falls within this realm of mu'amalat, where you have a little bit of flexibility in terms of the structure. But obviously, as Asad said, we have to operate in Australia. We're a non-Muslim country. We are under Australian law. We have to operate within Australian frameworks. So we always start with obviously what we can do, what would actually make the market. But the challenge is on us to always constantly develop and try to make it a bit more equitable.
Thank you very much. We've got 2 minutes left for one more question.
So it's a bit of an ignorant question, please state me. I don't, from a practicality point of view, and I think I'm coming back to that. So for an interest, a person borrows money, they have interest, they claim a tax deduction. They have a property, they sell it, they make capital gains, they pay tax on that. Islamic finance, number one. Number two, from LVR position and from cost of capital, whatever the equivalence of is in Islamic finance, is it the same? Is it higher? Please excuse my ignorance, I'm just asking because I have a lot of clients that don't want to put money in the bank because they don't want to earn interest. So I would like to give them that offer. They don't want to buy property because they don't want to borrow money. So I would love to advise them on that. And please, again, excuse my ignorance. Sure.
Look, thanks for the question. So the first part of your question was about tax, so I'll answer that. So, a lot of work was done through the private binding ruling system with the tax office to answer all of those questions. So, from a tax, there's no change, right? So the amounts that are rental, which would otherwise be interest, which you'd normally take a tax deduction for to achieve negative gearing, etc., that applies as normal. And there's lots of precedent with it. I worked with the ATO for on my clients for a long time to achieve that, and Imran did as well with their private binding rulings for their products. So there's not an issue around that. And in terms of the structure itself, the structure also respects the main residence exemption. So there's no capital gains tax on that, which is important for a lot of the customers in this area are owner occupiers. That's an important issue. In terms of your question on pricing and competitiveness, as a business ourselves, what we've done is we've partnered with non-banks, right? So because we've partnered with non-banks, we're able to offer financing, which would come from your normal sources of non-bank funding, which includes, for example, the superannuation industry in Australia. So the cost of capital isn't anymore, so it's as competitive. And also, over time, it's improved a lot in terms of the product suite. So, for example, at one stage, we could only do about 80% LVRs. Now we can go up to 95% LVRs. So I think that over time, and the other providers in the market, all of us have worked really hard to have a very broad product offering, which is competitive. I think 20 years ago, there was very much a notion that it was more expensive, and I think that has stuck in people's minds. But I can assure you, as of today, that's not the case. And on the tax side, I'm happy to chat with you afterwards and explain it and show you the tax rulings as well, yeah?
Thank you. Now, tonight I've got a lot of questions, so this is what we're going to do. I'm going to take a few more questions. If you want to start bringing the food, if we can do it table by table quietly, and if everyone promises to pay attention to the stage, not to the food, we'll continue with the questions. Is everyone okay with that? Do we understand the assignment? Fabulous. Okay, please.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights. There have some references made to the regulatory framework, legal challenge, and it sounds like that's kind of an impediment in terms of adoption of Islamic finance in Australia. I would like to know a little bit more about maybe some of those challenges and whether there are precedents maybe in other jurisdictions which might provide some form of guidance or encouragement for Australian government to just create a level playing field in Australia so that we all can benefit from it and perhaps establish Australia as a hub in Islamic finance in the Indo-Pacific area.
I think that from a regulatory perspective, I don't think there's any changes in the sense that if you offer finance, it's credit, and we have a credit licensing regime. If you're offering investment advice or managed funds, you've got a whole regime in ASIC under as a managed investment scheme and AFSL regime. And if you want to take deposits, there's a whole ADI regime under APRA. So I think all of that stuff is good, and I think that stuff is there. Where the in terms of overseas capital coming to Australia is tax issues, right? So because Islamic finance involves changes of assets, you end up with stamp duty taxation. So if you go to the Board of Taxation website, that's a non-government body, and it basically takes industry input and advises the government on tax reform. There's a paper in there called it's about Islamic finance. So Board of Taxation, Google Islamic finance. I was on an expert panel. There's a whole list of recommendations in there about amending Australian tax laws to facilitate that. And the government, that was probably the only thing, one of the only recommendations that came out of the Board of Taxation which the government hadn't implemented. So when overseas investors come into Australia and they want structures, and Imran comes across the structures don't work, we have to go to the tax office, get a tax ruling, you have to pay lawyers, they charge a lot of money, and then you end up with a cumbersome process. Whereas if there was tax reform to facilitate that, that would open things up, I think.
Can I just add to that, just to show you the complexity around some of these structures. So we were doing a sukuk bond, which is an Islamic bond issuance. So when you get the asset, right, you sell it to an SPV in the Cayman Islands or whatever, stamp duty, capital gains, GST. Then whether or not that's equity or debt, then if it's equity, the tax leakage is huge. If it's debt, income tax, interest withholding. Not sure if I've covered. Well, and then when you sell it back, you got capital gains, stamp duty, GST again. So the thing about what Australia lacks in terms of their considering where we sit in the region, where we sit in proximity towards Asia, and how if we just make that little bit of effort, it would send a message to the region that we're open for business. And if you think of post-GFC, where did the UK, where did they run to? They ran to the GCC. Trump, his first visit, the GCC, and so, but it's years of building that relationship with the region. Whereas in Australia, you know, we've got, as you know, a great opportunity. And so my argument in relation to thinking about Islamic financing, about creating a parity of treatment, is that it sends a message to investors in those regions that we are open for business and that we're willing and open to change. But our experience, or my experience, is that we're not.
Thank you very much. And Redwan, and then we've got one final question after Redwan.
Sorry, my name is Redwan Abdan, I'm ex-president of the AABC. I've got 3 questions in one, actually. Maybe it's unfair, but I'm one of the skeptics about Islamic finance. How Islamic is it and how halal is it? I mean, reconciling the religion with commerce, you're reconciling people who know a lot about finance with mullahs who know very little about finance, and vice versa. So maybe you can elaborate on that, if you can. The second one is, given Islamic finance, the way you present it, basically relies on equity and trade. And there's no concept of cost of capital and the RBA rate. How did Islamic finance fare during the GFC? Like in the last 10, 12 years, we had 2 shocks to the system. We had the GFC, where rates dropped significantly. And then we had COVID, where the RBA cut the rates to 0.1%. So that made the actual interest rate less than 2%. Islamic finance, the way you explained it, is quite expensive. How did Islamic finance fare in these 2 instances compared to the normal finance, I guess? The third one, as a chartered accountant by profession, is how do we report this? Because I've audited Islamic associations, and actually they do have this one. They report it as interest expense in the books. I found it a little bit strange to reconcile
an interest charge in the books, yet an Islamic finance on the balance sheet? These are my questions. Thank you.
We did the first one. Do you want to do the first one and then you do the two seconds? Okay. All right. Oh, jeez. Far out, bro. Making us work for our fatouche and... I think on your first question, is it truly Islamic? And I think, again, we have to... Sorry? Yeah. Like, is it true? It's a fair comment. And I think it goes back to how Islamic law is structured. And I'm not sure... we are Islamic. There's often a perception that we have a Islamic law works similar to the Catholic Pope. Everybody kind of falls into line, or a Baba, and everybody kind of falls into line. I know this because I'm half Chinese, and نص صيني نص ملاوي. نص عائلتي مسيحيين نص مسلمين. I know the kind of understanding on both sides. So in Islam you have schools of law, and again when it comes to mu'amalat, in that realm of social interactions, everything is halal except what is prohibited. So the default position is that it's halal. So what happens is you might get a structure, and it looks like interest, it smells like interest, but it's actually a permissible transaction. Is it haram? If it's not haram, it becomes part. If it's not haram, it becomes part. It might be discouraged. It might be what we call mubah, neither here nor there, or it might be Maqasid al-Sharia, which is the overarching principles of spirit of the Islamic law, to determine what is the correct. One of my teachers in Nigeria, he looks after Islamic financing for poverty alleviation. So I went to him and go, okay, Sheikh, that means you do musharaka structures, right? Because that is the most Islamic structure. It's partnership, it's economic risk sharing. And he goes, no, we just do ijara, right? Ijara being leasing. Because these people do not want you in their business. So what do you do in that context? Do you push what we perceive to be a more Islamic structure, being the musharaka structure, but it's at a detriment to that poverty alleviation in that particular locality? Or do we push an equally permitted product, which is ijara, leasing, and it achieves a socio-economic outcome? So I think that's one point. It's kind of structure agnostic. It depends on this the context, which is, and the scholars to say if it's really the halalness of it all, so to speak. What I will say about these scholars in terms of their degree of sophistication, AABC, which is the governing body that looks after all Islamic finance transactions globally, against an investment banker, they know their stuff inside out. They know their what's called fiqh al-mu'amalat, their jurisprudence in relation to financial transactions. Obviously Arabic, they've worked in the industry, they know banking and finance, and they've had to work under the industry for about 10 years before they can give a fatwa on a financial transaction. We found in Australia, no sheikh in Australia that we found actually fits this criteria that can give a fatwa on a financial transaction. But every imam give a view whether this is halal or haram. But when you ask the imam, what was your, with all due respect, sheikh, what was your specialty? They might be specialized in Qira'atul Quran or stories of the Prophet. They're not equipped in Islamic financing. So that's why we kind of went for a global Sharia board. Sorry, I went a bit long. That's right. So just to answer just your second question, and I'm glad you mentioned the GFC, because then I can't hide my age as well because I lived through it, right? So when we talk about the GFC, we had these derivatives, which were credit derivatives in the United States, and all of those collapsed, yeah? That's what created the GFC. No sukuk collapsed. So sukuk are the Islamic bonds, right? So no sukuk collapsed in 2008. That's a documented fact. All of the bonds from the United States that were underpinned by mortgages, right? So no sukuk collapsed in 2008. That's a documented fact. All of the bonds from the United States that were underpinned by mortgages, these credit defaults, they all collapsed. So there's a big difference whether something Sharia compliant or not. Where you've got rates like the RBA cash rate or the Federal Reserve rate, in finance, all we do in funds management that provides finance, and we will benchmark that against what the risk-free rate is. And everybody uses the Federal Reserve rate, the RBA rate. It's a mathematical formula. So it's kind of irrelevant. What's relevant is what's the legal transaction, because remember, in the Quran it talks about trade. Trade's permitted. Am I selling something to you? Is there a legal agreement that says I sell something to you that justifies the payment? And when I sell something to you, I take a risk and you take a risk because it's a transaction. And I think you've got to view it from that lens, and that's where it's very different.
Thank you so much. We've left best for last with Kay, and it will be a very quick question, not a 3-point question.
So this one is for Dr. Anisa. Shout out to the only one on the panel. We've heard a lot about success in Islamic finance. What is happening to change the cynicism that is really there amongst the community, especially a lot of Muslim people that don't want these products?
You're talking about amongst the Muslim community. I think the cynicism, a lot of it, and I'll go back to what Asad and saying, is a lot of it is just misunderstanding and misconceptions. As with every industry, realities that often need to be explored, explained. Every industry realities that often need to be explored. In many cases, a lot of perhaps critics don't really want to get into the discussion, made their decision about something. And look, to be honest, unfortunately, there are a number of situations where people have and so on that describe themselves as Islamic, followed proper regulation, they have not followed due diligence, and that erodes the trust by the Muslim community in these things. Are quite recent, and it's very heartbreaking because this is where people have put their hard-earned money into this, trusting people, but not being aware of how to read documents, how to read, disclosures and so on, and things that are available there to say, okay, is this a low risk, is this a medium risk, or is this a high risk venture? And a lot of just everyday mums and dads, everyday people of the community, again, I talk about the importance of having that financial literacy because, those disclosures are there, but people don't know where to look for them, they don't know what to see, and they just go on trust. They go on, this sounds good, this looks good, but they're not looking at, is this, what's the track record? And so there needs to be, really long risk, or is this a high risk venture? Falling behind because wealth growth really doesn't just benefit the family, it benefits communities as a whole. And I talked about the waqf, and I talked about how when we have successful communities, these can create opportunities long term. They can create opportunities for everyone to benefit, not just Muslims. It can be for everyone. There can be scholarships, there can be services, there can be all kinds of benefits that come out of being able to be smart and be, rigorous and be careful with your finances. And this is something that as a community we all need to work on, and we need to grow and build together.
Thank you so much. As you know, today we did it slightly differently. By now we would have well and truly been with dinner, but I just want to say exceptional panelists, members, and thank you for sharing your insights with us with so much compassion, so much pride, so much, and we can see how much you put into the community. And thank you for taking the time out to be with us tonight as well. Just a reminder for us here at AABC, it's really important that we can have these conversations, and we are open to exploring so many in-depth topics together. Now, you'll be with us for the rest of the evening. For now, please do enjoy your dinner. We can leave them alone to have dinner for a few minutes, because I know what this is like, and then please go for it. But thank you so much again. Please, very well, thank you. Everyone, do enjoy dinner. I'll be back in about 10 minutes. Please don't forget to also put your business card. Don't leave.